Hello, thank you for joining the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs for our Wednesday webinar. Today we'll be talking about filing a complaint with SCDCA, and this is one of the key missions of our agency, and that's to help consumers with complaints related to businesses in our state. So our agency mediates thousands of these complaints each year. So we're going to kind of go over some of the complaint process, an explanation of our voluntary mediation process, kind of how complaints are received and the types of complaints we commonly receive from people. It's kind of important to mention that all of this is free. You can file a complaint with SCDCA if you're a South Carolina resident or if the business is in our state. So our roadmap today will give you a quick overview of our agency, how we can help you, things that we're involved with. We'll go over some complaint data, and then we'll go over the basics of how to file a complaint with SCDCA, and we'll go over the process. We'll look at our closing categories that we use and some of the referrals as well. And those are other state agencies that we may send you to, depending on the type of situation that you come to us with. And then we've got some frequently asked questions that we'll go over as well. So how can SCDCA help you? So of course you can file a complaint with our agency, and we'll get into all of those details here momentarily. You can also report a scam or identity theft with us. We have an identity theft unit that was created a little bit over 10 years ago, getting close to 11 years, I believe. And they can kind of go through those types of situations with you, and they have a checklist that they have, and they can walk you through steps you might need to take to kind of minimize damage and prevent other types of damage from happening if your identity has been compromised. And you can also report those scams to our agency as well. And that helps us kind of notify other people in the state about what's going on and educate others. So hopefully they won't become a victim to a scam. And we've also got a background of business section. I'll show you a little bit about that in this presentation, so you can kind of search through complaints that have been filed with our agency. And we also have some resources to help you find out if a business is maybe licensed by our agency, or if there's another state agency that would regulate that business. We can walk you through that here in just a bit. We also get free presentations. We do them virtually, and we also do them in person. So we have a variety of topics. We do identity theft, scam prevention are our big topics that we do. We also do credit reports and scores, things like that. And we also have a Ditch the Pitch bingo, which is our scam prevention tools that we do to bingo. And you can basically request us to come out to your group, your church, Girl Scouts, whatever type of community group you may have, and we'll come out and do those presentations for you for free. And we also can help answer any questions that you may have. We're not always the proper person or a business agency to get those things to, but we will direct you to the proper place. And we have a real person who will answer our phones and get you kind of directed to where you need to go if it's something that we don't directly handle. And all of our resources are on consumer.sc.gov. The little how do I button is kind of the best place to start looking whenever you go to our website. So it's going to have that file a complaint, background of business, and those identity theft, scam, and presentation things that we discussed there. And I'll show you a little bit more around our website here in just a second. So now we'll kind of get into the topic that you came here for, and that's filing a complaint with the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. And again, it's a no-cost option. So it's kind of set up to help find solutions for the consumer and business, and it can include refunds, credits, adjustments. It typically involves consumer transactions involving goods or services purchased for personal, family, or household use. So that's kind of important to mention, that it has to be a personal or family household use there. And if a complaint falls within the jurisdiction of another state or federal agency, we must refer that complaint to that agency, and we'll notify the consumer as well that we've moved that complaint to that agency. And kind of one of those types of things that might be a situation like that, might be something like a restaurant where we don't do the health inspections and things like that. So we would refer that. It's now the Department of Agriculture that handles those. But if it's something like that, that state law mandates that another state agency handle those types of issues, we would make sure that complaint gets transferred over to them, because that's the way state laws laid out things for us. So they've got it set up so certain agencies handle certain issues. And if it falls into one of those, we'll refer it to them. And if it's something that is not regulated by state law or something that state law regulate or mandates that we handle, we'll handle those complaints. And if it's something that's not handled by any state agency, we'll handle that in our voluntary mediation process. And we'll kind of go over a lot of that as we get going. But some of the complaints that we cannot handle, and again, all of these things are kind of set by state law, kind of sets out what we can and can't do. One of the things that we're not allowed to do is do a business versus business complaint. So if you've got that type of situation, maybe something where you need to maybe discuss it with the court, look at your contracts, those types of things, but we are not able to accept complaints between two businesses. And on the flip side of that, we also can't handle complaints between individuals. So it does need to be an individual versus a business and not person to person. We also can't handle employer and employee disputes. So that might be something if you have questions or arguments about your pay rate, and if you're not getting paid properly on your paycheck, something like that, that would be a complaint that we would not be able to handle. And we also can't take complaints against other government agencies, and that includes local, state, federal agencies, and kind of the one that we probably see the most that typically people try to come to us with are things involving the Postal Service. So just keep in mind that that is a federal agency and state law does not allow us to take complaints involving those types of issues. And we also cannot take complaints about discrimination. That's one of those issues that falls outside of our jurisdiction. And if you're represented by an attorney or if legal action's already been started with your case, that's something where most of the time we're not able to accept those complaints. And reason for that is then, the court has become that kind of agency or that place where these things are supposed to be handled out. So the judge in that case would then have kind of all the authority in that. So, just kind of leave it up to the judge at that point if you've already filed legal action and have an attorney representing you with that type of situation. And we're often asked kind of how do we use complaint data when somebody's filed a complaint with us? What do we do with that information? Kind of the first thing that we do is we share those details with the appropriate business. And I always tell people, the business has to be able to respond. So, in order to do that, we've got to share that information with that business. So, we're not able to take those anonymous complaints where if you don't want to share your name and all of that, we've got to be able to tell the business who it was and kind of what that situation was so they can respond. And that's kind of why that's the case like that. But we do share that information with those complaints with the business that was involved. And complaints are available, some information on our public search site. We'll show you that here later on in the presentation, but I kind of like to mention on that, it's not going to have your name, your phone number, and those kind of protected things about you on there. It will be pretty generic when it shows up on the public search site so people can see if complaints have been filed against a business, but it's not going to give all those specific details about you per se, but it would have that information about whatever the details of your complaint may have been. It's a pretty brief summary that's provided on that website. And then we also analyze that complaint data, try to help us figure out if illegal business practices are taking place. And it might also help our legal division enforce consumer protection laws. And it might also kind of help us identify trends that are happening in the marketplace. So if there's things that are going on that, lawmakers may need to know about, we kind of take that information and provide it to them as well. If there's some kind of trend that's going on where we're seeing kind of the same occurrences or the same complaints over and over. And monthly, we provide information to the Federal Trade Commission about those complaints, and they kind of do the same thing with us as well. They give us some information of things that have been filed with them. And we do that just so, they can help understand if there's things going on across the country with the same types of issues. So they'll look at that as well. And sometimes there's a business in our state that may be operating, in other states as well. And if they're seeing those same types of issues across state lines, that may be a situation where the Federal Trade Commission gets involved and kind of looks at, what's happening and why, and if there are regulations that are being violated with that as well. All right, so now we'll kind of look at some of the divisions of South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs and how it involves the complaint process. All of our complaints start in our Consumer Services Division, and that's kind of one of our main setups of our division. We're divided into several different areas, but typically those things will start in the Consumer Services Division. If it's an industry, again, that we don't regulate, those complaints are going to stay in the Consumer Services Division, and they'll go through that voluntary mediation process with that. But if the complaint involves an industry that we do regulate and we have a regulatory authority over that situation, and we want to look to see if it violates Consumer Protection Code or maybe some kind of unfair situation in the marketplace, we'll then send those complaints to our legal department, where attorneys may take a look at it, and some people who are a little bit more versed in some of the different things in the Consumer Protection Code, they'll kind of take a look at it and analyze the situation and go from there with it. And when we talk about the Consumer Protection Code and the types of things that we regulate with that, most of those are credit related, and we'll kind of show you some of that here a little bit later in the presentation too, so you can take a look at those different areas that are regulated by SCDCA. We also, again, I mentioned it earlier at the start of the presentation, our identity theft units, sometimes they will also get involved in complaints, and usually those are situations involving identity theft, maybe credit reporting issues, maybe a hacked or fraudulent account. Complaint may start with, again, the Consumer Services Division, and then we'll pass it along to those different divisions, especially if they determine that maybe a scam was involved, they'll send it to the identity theft unit. So they can kind of follow up with that consumer about different information to protect their personal information or their accounts. Some kind of things involving some of those scam situations may be a debt collection or something like that. Maybe it starts as a harassment complaint that our legal division is looking at, but then they kind of take a closer look and they say, well, this isn't a real company, it's something set up through identity theft or scam situation. So they would then kind of pass it off to our identity theft unit, since it's not involving an actual debt collection company. So that might be a situation like that that would get passed to our identity theft unit. So that's not too uncommon that a couple of different divisions may kind of look at the complaint and then decide it should go to a different division within our agency. All right, so now when it comes to 2024, just kind of wanted to give you guys a look at some of the different types of complaints that have come into our agency over the past, well, this would have been last year. We received just over 5,000 complaints, and it's getting close to 6,000 there, 5,800 complaints received in 2024. And the department helped consumers recover $1.4 million. And a lot of times that's credits, adjustments, refunds, those types of things. So that's kind of why we word it as recovered or saved for folks. So again, $1.4 million in 2024, and those credits, adjustments, refunds, those types of things. And here is a quick look at the kind of categories of how we have them set up for those complaints in 2024. And you'll kind of notice the top one there was real estate. And when we talk about real estate, typically for us, that's going to involve homeowners associations or timeshares. So it's a little bit different than maybe what you would see with real estate transactions as far as, property sales and things like that. Those types of things would generally be handled with labor licensing and regulation. They have a real estate commission that would handle a lot of those types of issues. But as far as SCDCA goes, we kind of use that term real estate for things that would involve usually homeowners associations, like I mentioned, and timeshares as well. So of those 1,135 complaints, if you break that down a little bit, homeowners association complaints made up 617 of those that were filed of that number, and another 471 of those complaints were related to timeshares. So that was kind of that big bulk of those real estate transactions that we have listed there. Vehicle complaints, generally one of the top couple of complaints that we have each year. In 2024, they were at second on that list that we have there. Vehicle complaints, about 541,000 of this year's refunds, credits, and adjustments that we mentioned there. So that 1,121 complaints made up about $541,000 of those refunds, credits, and adjustments that we mentioned earlier. And contractors kind of round up that top three. Again, Department of Labor Licensing Regulation, they handle a lot of the licensing involving contractors and builders. A lot of the types of things that we might get involved in that would maybe be some kind of pricing dispute, billing dispute, something like that. Not necessarily the some of the issues that may go on if somebody's, permitted to be able to do the work that they're doing or something like that. Again, LLR would handle a lot of those types of things, but sometimes people come to us about different kind of billing issues, and that might be something that we get involved in. Then you can kind of see the rest of the list there. Landlord tenants, I like to mention it. You see it at number 6. That is a situation where people can come to us as far as, something going on with their landlord. If that's, maybe repairs not being made or something going on where they were overbilled 1 month or something like that. Those are types of things that we might see. It's kind of important. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is that that's kind of one of those situations where we don't have regulatory authority. Magistrates court generally has a lot of the authority with that. So while we can take those complaints for voluntary mediation, it also may be something that after we've handled it, we would recommend if you need further guidance, you might need to go to magistrates court to see if they'll decide what the situation may call for and if things have been handled properly by you and the landlord. Medical, that's also kind of one of those things as well, depending on what's going on. Usually our complaint system would do more in the billing type stuff. So we're not kind of looking at the regulatory stuff with medical care per se, but maybe, some of those billing issues that come along. And I also kind of wanted to show you a little bit about the complaints from this year so far. So from January 1st to June 30th, you'll see kind of some of the same types of issues coming up with complaints that have been received by SCDCA. See a little change in the first 2 that we have there. So vehicles was so far this year been the number 1 complaint that we've received. Real estate, you'll see number 2, and contractors at number 3. And so far this year, as far as everything totaled, we've received about 3,100 complaints, a little bit more than that. Again, you see those top complaints listed there. And so far this year, our agency has kind of helped people recover $823,379 recovered for consumers up until June 30th. So that's the first 6 months of the year, and that's about 44% more than what was recovered last year during that same time period. So that's just something to keep in mind too with that. So people are always asking, why do I want to file a complaint? Those refunds, credit adjustments might be, something that can happen in those types of situations, depending on what's going on. So we'll kind of walk you through a little bit of the process of how to file a complaint. The best way to do that, can't stress it enough, consumer.sc.gov is going to be that best place to go. And we'll kind of explain a little bit of that. But of course, that's going to be the fast way to do it, right? Everything online is a lot faster going than that paper process that can kind of be slow because you're relying on mail and all of that and just kind of retyping things, scanning documents, those types of things. So the website is going to be the faster and kind of preferred way to go. If you need a printed version, we can mail that to you. You can also download the form on our website. I'm going to give you a quick look at that. And if you've downloaded the slides, you should be able to see that. I'm going to click into the little box there, make sure, yeah, we have popped those in there. So you should see the complaint form in there as well. And if you have an issue with that, we do have those on consumer.sc.gov. But that is kind of the quick look at the hard copy of that form. Again, you can have that mailed to you if you need. We do that all of the time. But again, kind of the thing to keep in mind with that, the manual process is a little bit slower than doing online. And we'll kind of show you a little bit about the website now with that. So consumer.sc.gov. Having a hard time saying that today, consumer.sc.gov. And that little how do I button is the best place to look, right in the middle of the screen. And you'll want to look at that file a complaint button. If you just click that, it will take you to this page. And this is kind of what our complaints page looks like. And you'll see some of those little subcategories in there. Of course, the file a general complaint is kind of where you'll go to get all that going. If you have something that's happening to you and you want to file a complaint with us, that general complaint section there in the green is going to be the place to start with that. And we'll show you a little bit more here in a second with the search complaints tool, but that's going to kind of give you access to the number of complaints that have maybe been filed against the business and that database that has a lot of information about the nature of a complaint, the status of it, how it's been closed, if that's something that was favorable to the consumer, or sometimes we have business satisfied, and we'll show you some of that details here in a minute. But that database is going to give you access to complaints filed with our agency since January 1st, 2014. That referrals agency tab you see there, that's going to kind of give you that list of other state agencies that might handle various types of situations. So that might be something you want to take a look at too before you start filing that general complaint. I always tell people, if it's something handled by another state agency, you might want to kind of skip the process of filing that complaint with us. If you can get it to that other place first, and get that information in front of them, that might kind of help you get that thing going faster than starting with us, and then we take a look at it and then refer it to that other agency. So it's always kind of a good idea to take a look at that referral agency page. The complaint process videos, that's going to give you a couple of different videos. One of them will kind of walk you through the complaint process and instructions on how to use the system that we have for that. And then we'll give you an overview of that. And it's also going to kind of give you some information on setting up an account. Maybe if you're a business and you need to respond to complaints, we've got some videos on that as well, kind of walking businesses through that. So the videos about the complaint process may be a good place to take a look too before you get one. So again, why should I file my complaint online? I mentioned it a second ago, but the speed is going to be the biggest thing for you there. And it's also provides everything in one place, right? So it will kind of give you access to any of that information from the business, how they've responded to your complaint. So that would be posted in that portal. Also give you access to the person handling your complaint. So if you need to send them a message, you'll be able to click their name and it will shoot them an email where you can, provide any of that information about the complaint. Maybe you have a quick update to something that's happened. Sometimes consumers hear directly back from a business before we do, and the consumer will tell us, they've got the situation resolved or whatever the situation is. So that's something that you can use on that as well. So you can get kind of that email access to the person handling your complaint. You can kind of shoot them that quick message there as well. But kind of another good thing about the online complaint portal is if you have another issue arise with a different company and you need to file a complaint, a few months from now or whatever the case may be, you can use that same account to kind of handle that complaint as well. And you can kind of look to see the situation with it as you look at the situation of your initial complaint as well. So that's kind of a good resource to start with. And I've always kind of get asked from people too. We get emails occasionally from folks. You'll see there the forgot your password and forgot your username information. Whenever I pull up the complaints, it doesn't really show me a lot of the information about the person. Like I'm not able to reset their password and things like that. So it's always kind of a good place to start there too. If you've forgotten your username or your password, you can go in there and get those things reset, and they'll send you that email that will let you know, your password's been reset and all that. So that's a good place to start with that too. We do want to kind of mention HOA complaints because they are a little bit different than our regular complaint process. And we'll go ahead and kind of pull all of these little slides out there for you. But I'd like to mention whenever we mention HOA complaints that SCDCA doesn't have regulatory or enforcement authority over HOA matters. We have a lot of different webinars on this, and we have a different section on our website as well. And you'll see it on that complaint page that has a specific HOA section. But we are kind of mandated by state law to take HOA complaints, but we do not have the authority to require your homeowners association to take part in the process or require them to take specific actions. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. Under state law, we have very specific information that we're required to get about HOAs. And then we provide that yearly report to the governor, the General Assembly, and we post it for the public on our website. So that's kind of why we have that supplemental questionnaire. And those are those specific things that state lawmakers want to know about HOAs. And that is required for those HOA complaints. We're not able to process those complaints or move anything forward if you do not fill out that questionnaire. Unfortunately, there's a lot of times where people don't fill out that questionnaire and they maybe don't respond to our request for all of those additional details. And then we have to close out that complaint as abandoned. You don't want to have your complaint considered as abandoned if you're actually trying to get, some kind of resolution or some kind of answer as far as what's happening, why it's happening. So you want to make sure that you submit that supplemental questionnaire. And if you've downloaded everything for today, that questionnaire was one of the documents that we had in there. And I'm going to show you that here in a second. But again, that is that kind of required information that lawmakers take a look at, and they might use that information that's provided to them to decide if anything needs to change in state law, or they may decide they like things the way they are and things are working perfectly fine. So those are kind of those pieces of information that helps them make that decision. Again, here's that paper version of that. We do have this on our website as well through our complaint portal. So if you're going through that, it will ask you if it's an HOA issue, and you'll then have that questionnaire through that. But this is what that paper version of that looks like, and we can mail that out to you as well if you have a issue going on with a complaint. We do have these on our website as well, but if you've got the slides, you should be able to click this, I believe, as well, to get in there and get that information. But again, all that information is required, and it's going to kind of go through, and it's going to ask you a series of questions. Some of those include, is there an HOA management company? Have you received copies of the governing documents? Do you understand your rights and obligation under those governing documents? So it's got a very specific set of questions that those lawmakers want to hear about from folks as they get moving forward with deciding if anything needs to change with that or not. And if you want to learn more about HOA complaints, or just in general about HOA laws that may impact your situation, we do have an HOA education page. You'll see that right there. Below that link is the HOA reports page. So if you're curious about your HOA, if there's been complaints about it, things like that, you can look at that. It also has information about what we've seen across the state as far as some of those top reported categories and things like that. So yearly, we post those details on our website, and go to that HOA report page and take a look at that. The HOA education page is great. It has a lot of different things about various state laws, different things with the complaint process with HOAs, so that, if it applies to your situation, I encourage you to take a look at that. Maybe start there before you look at the complaint page as well. But we also have a lot of our videos on YouTube. That YouTube HOA playlist is a great place to go. And that's going to give you some of those videos regarding specifically with HOA laws, the complaint process with HOAs, and some of our frequently asked questions involving homeowners associations. So that's a great tool for you to go to if that's an issue that is impacting you. We always like to kind of give folks a look at kind of the best ways to set up your complaint, and kind of the big three things to consider whenever you're filling out the complaint form and providing all those details. You want to tell us what happened. You want to include those key details, and we say include those supporting documents. So if you had a, maybe a contract, something like that, you would want to put it, or if you have photos of something that's happened, photo of a receipt might even be helpful. You don't want to provide that information if it's got, personal identifying information. You might want to cover that up if it's on those documents, but any of those details with supporting documents, those are always helpful, especially if it's involving something that, has a contract involved. I would say that's always kind of a big thing, but any of those little things that you can provide that allow us to provide that much information to that business. So you want to have that in there too, but also tell us kind of what you've done, maybe what you've tried to do to resolve the problem. So you want to tell us about that, especially if you've already reached out to the business and had a, interaction with them. Tell us about that. Tell us how you tried to resolve the situation, and also tell us kind of what you think would be a fair resolution. That's an important part of it. Let us know what you think a fair resolution would be. Sometimes, I tell people even just writing out these three things can help kind of get a pretty good explanation of what's happened, what you want to have happen to that business. Because a lot of times when we're upset and talking to people about something bad that's happened, or something that we're not happy with, we're kind of mishmashing things and not giving a kind of good outline of what's happened and what we want to have happen. So sometimes just kind of sitting a little bit later and writing this stuff out can kind of help lead to that resolution that you would like. All right, so now we're going to get a little bit into our complaint process and just kind of how it works. And so once you file that complaint with us, we then get that process within our agency. So we'll assign it to somebody. We have a couple of analysts who will work on that, and we'll get it assigned to the proper division. So like I said, that may be our consumer services division, that may be the legal division, or that may be the identity theft division, just kind of depending on what's going on. We generally try to have that process started out and kind of gone through our internal stuff within 2 business days. And then we'll get that information out to the business. And we generally give them 20 business days from the time that we've mailed the complaint information to them. We give them 20 business days to provide that initial response, that first response to whatever the situation may be. So we're trying to give them enough time to kind of look over what's happened and what may be going on with your situation. And if we don't hear from them, we will send them a follow-up letter, just kind of let them know that we're still waiting on them to see what's going on. And that letter will kind of notify them that we're, giving them additional 10 business days to respond to that complaint. And if we still haven't heard from them, we'll send a second follow-up, and that's going to provide additional 5 days to respond. And then if we don't hear anything, that process starts where we tell the business that we're going to close that complaint as unsatisfied if we don't get that response after that second follow-up. And generally, if we haven't received a response, that's going to be kind of closed out 45 calendar days from the date that that complaint was mailed out to the business. And then we'll notify that consumer that that complaint was being closed out as unsatisfied, that we haven't heard anything back from the business. So again, the consumer is notified about everything that's kind of going on with that. But if we haven't heard anything, generally that's about 45 days from the time that we mailed that first notification to that business. And throughout the whole process, if we're receiving anything from the business, we will review that once we've kind of taken a look at that. If we have additional questions, we may reach out to that business, kind of clarify things like that. Once we kind of got a feel of whatever the business response is from them, we'll then notify the consumer, provide that response to the consumer. Again, that's usually through that online portal process. That's going to be the best place to kind of keep an eye out for those, and we will send you that notification once we have everything from the business that is kind of necessary to close out that complaint. And you've kind of heard me mention some of the things about some of the closing categories and kind of how we consider that. This is kind of the first screen of some of those. We have a good bit of categories that we use with that. So obviously satisfied, consumer satisfied is that when the business responds and the consumer is satisfied with what's happened. Sometimes it may be an adequate business response. So that may be business not necessarily satisfying the wishes of the consumer, but they've responded to all the points. They've referred to their policy, or they're supporting their claims. So they're explaining kind of why the situation is what it is. So again, that would be kind of adequate business response. They have replied, they've explained whatever the situation is with them and why they took the actions that they've had. Unsatisfied, I just kind of mentioned a second ago. Generally, that's when we didn't receive anything from the business as far as responding to the complaint. We've sent all those reminders and we never got anything back from the business. That's generally what that unsatisfied is. Referred, we kind of mentioned this at the top of the presentation, but generally that's when we send the complaint to another agency. So there's another state agency that handles that type of situation. We would take that case and refer it to them. Again, state law kind of mandates what state agencies handle. And if there's another state agency that's kind of given that responsibility over a situation, we'll send that case or that complaint to them. Information, from time to time, there's things that come into us from the complaints. Generally, it's a lot of times involving attorneys where they're just provided us information about a complaint that they filed a legal process about sometimes. But generally, if you just see information in our database, that's just that we've been notified that something has occurred. From time to time, when you're searching in our database, you might see duplicate. And of course, that's just simply somebody's filed multiple complaints involving the same issue, or sometimes somebody might have an update to a situation, but it's pretty much the same complaint, but just maybe, a few weeks later or something like that. That would be considered a duplicate complaint as well. And sometimes people just didn't realize the whole process maybe finished when they were going through the website and they, kind of double send it. So that might be a situation where you see duplicate. Insufficient merit, that's kind of a complaint where it's kind of hard to determine the nature of the complaint. That would be one of those in there. Maybe it's something that's not really true or substantiated. That might be one of those situations in there. We mentioned abandoned. That's something that happens with homeowner associations sometimes because that form isn't there. It's just kind of in general, whenever you see those abandoned, it's something where the consumer maybe decided they didn't want to proceed with the process or weren't responding when we needed additional information. Sometimes that will happen as well, where the consumer decides they don't want to go forward, and then that complaint is considered abandoned. So that process just kind of stops once that consumer has decided not to move forward. Undetermined is something that is in there from time to time, and that's typically when there's a response from the business and they're kind of disputing a lot of the facts that the consumer had, and it's just kind of hard to tell exactly what is going on. There's maybe too big of a gap between the two situations where it's just hard to kind of get the two on the same side. So everything's kind of in dispute as far as what those initial facts are of the situation, and that might be a case where something is listed as undetermined. And you did hear me refer about some of the top referral agencies a moment ago, and this is kind of our quick list of some of the different state agencies that we might send something to. So here's talk about the Board of Financial Institutions and their Consumer Finance Division. A lot of times that's things, payday lenders, check cashers, those types of things. Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation. Again, they're one of the larger state agencies. You heard me talk about contractors, real estate brokers. They would generally take those types of complaints, depending on what the situation is. Department of Insurance, obviously handles insurance companies, things like that. Department of Public Health would do your health facilities, so hospitals, hospice care, things like that, tattoo facilities. Department of Agriculture, I mentioned a little bit ago, they would do those food establishments, so they're doing those health code inspections, those types of things. So if it's something about cleanliness in a restaurant, you probably want to go to Department of Agriculture. But if it's something involving, those disputes of the bill, or maybe you're being charged multiple times from that, that would be something that we might be able to assist with. Secretary of State's office generally will handle things about business filings or charity filings, notaries, things like that. And Human Affairs Commission is one that we refer folks to from time to time. And again, that's going to be those discrimination type complaints, especially if they involve housing or employment situations. So that's a good list to keep in mind. I'll show you a little bit later how to find that on our website. Kind of one of the big things to keep in mind if you're filing a complaint with us, and I hate that I even have to mention this, but if your complaint involves profanity written out in it or vulgar language, our agency is not going to process that complaint. So just kind of keep that in mind. Keep it clean as you're filling out those complaints with our agency. And again, they cannot be anonymous. So we need information about who it is. And that's just simply so we can provide that information to the business and they'll be able to respond appropriately. A lot of times especially with HOA complaints, people don't want their HOA to know that it's them filing that complaint. Under state law, we need that information so we can give that information to the HOA and they can respond properly. But that it kind of applies to all businesses as well. They've got to kind of know who they're responding to be able to fully understand what's happened and what that situation may be. All right, and your complaint cannot be removed from the online complaint system once it's been submitted to us. That's something that people kind of mention to us sometimes. They say, I didn't realize it was going to be included in the public database. Well, we are a state agency and information provided to us does kind of become that public record. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. And it is published on that database. It is in that online complaint system. Again, it's not going to provide that information about your name, your phone number, email address, anything like that in the public database. That information is given to the company that you filed that complaint with, just again, so they can respond, but it is not provided on that online complaint database there. And again, exact copy of your complaint, the supporting documents are given to the business, and that's just so they can kind of respond to all of that. And I do like to mention that the Freedom of Information Act for our state does require us to release information from time to time. So if you're submitting a complaint, there is potential that somebody would look at that, fill out a Freedom of Information Act request. That's usually maybe an attorney, maybe a news organization, be a lot of different people. General public members can do this as well. So we kind of encourage you not to put a lot of that sensitive information, such as social security numbers, account numbers, things like that on those requests. We will go through that. State law requires us to remove your name, phone number, those types of things when those requests involve you. But, kind of the best practice with all of these things is don't put information on there that, might be sensitive or other people can take advantage of. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're filling out these forms. Some of our frequently asked questions. A lot of times we're asked how many people handle complaints. Obviously, we're handling complaints filed across the state. And we just mentioned it was 5,800 complaints filed last year. And we have about 6 people who handle those complaints generally. So, those complaints are coming in, large number of those. So it's about 6 people handling those complaints. And, in addition to that, we also kind of mentioned that we're also getting phone calls from people who maybe haven't gone through the complaint process as well, but they want to know a little bit about situations before they do that. So we are kind of taking in those thousands of phone calls as well about those types of things. So just kind of keep that in mind. So sometimes it can get a little bogged down with the number of things, but generally speaking, again, we're pretty quick about responding to all of those complaints and getting them processed. Why do you only regulate certain businesses? Generally, state law takes care of that. State law kind of outlines what each agency in the state can and can't do. So certain businesses they have put under our regulatory authority. Certain other types of industries they put under other state agencies. So all of that's kind of spelled out by state law. And then the places that aren't regulated or the industries that aren't regulated, state law kind of says that we handle those complaints through a voluntary mediation process. So that's kind of why that is the way it is. And it's kind of written out through state law. So why file a complaint if you can't force a business to do what I want? Kind of the big reason for that, that I encourage folks with, you may be able to get again, those refunds, credits, adjustments that we talked about earlier. Sometimes it's just kind of about notifying other people about what's going on. That can be helpful as well. So it's just kind of a process that may help you and it may help other people. So if there's a reoccurring situation as well, it may kind of help our legal division kind of understand what's happening and if there's situations that might need to be looked at or referred to a federal agency, those types of things. And what happens when you get a complaint against a business you regulate? Complaints that involve businesses that we regulate, depending on what the situation may be, there could be enforcement actions, maybe fines, restitution to consumers, loan forgiveness in some cases, might even be a removal of credit history if there's loans involved and all that stuff's kind of showing up on their credit reports. And there's evidence that, something was going on with that loan, it shouldn't have been processed or shouldn't have been reflected poorly on their credit reports. Those things can be removed. So all of those actions, of course, can depend on the very specifics of those situations. And our legal division will take a look at that. Again, there could be in those enforcement actions, it could be a court case, something like that. Depending on what's going on, a judge may be involved and then make those rulings on whatever, the law should be applied to that situation. They'll kind of go through that through the court process. So those are all different types of things that can happen with those situations. And I do want to show you our complaint search system real quick. And if you've downloaded the slides, you'll see this link there on the left that you'll be able to click and download. Again, that's on that little how do I button. If you go to our complaints page, you'll see that. Once you've clicked onto our search complaints link that's on that page, you'll be taken to the complaint database, which you see there on the right of the screen. The complaint database will have that public information section on it. And in there is where you can enter the business name. Sometimes if you're not quite sure about how the business is worded, the name of it, you might want to click the begins with, or you might want to click the name contained section. Both of those can be pretty helpful. But if you put a name of a business in there and then hit search, it's going to give you a list. It might say, you might at first see a couple of different businesses with similar names, especially if you're using the contained names. But once you click that, it would then kind of show you a list of how many complaints have been filed with that company. And this is kind of a quick example that I pulled up. I left off the name of the business because I didn't want to kind of single anybody out with that type of thing. But it's going to give you that short summary. And then if you click the date that is on there on to the side, on that left side, if you were to click that date, it would open up and give you a little bit more information in that summary. So it's going to kind of show you a little bit about what the consumer said happened. You'll also be able to see that status type. So in one of these situations, it said consumer satisfied, and in the other situation, it was closed as unsatisfied. So you can kind of take a look at those, see what's going on. In this case, you may say, well, they've had 2 complaints and they were both several years ago. So depending on the type of business and how big they are, 2 complaints since 2014 isn't very many. So that might kind of help you make those decisions about if you want to go forward with using a company or not. So that's kind of a good resource and a place that I tell people to use that search complaint tool that might give you a little bit of information about, a situation. And also, like I said, just kind of keep in mind too, the size of the business. If you're searching for a giant, national retailer, you may see a lot more, but that's not really kind of a good percentage in relation to the customers they may have in the States. So just kind of keep all of that in mind as you're clicking through there, but it may give you some insights to look at how a business maybe responded to other consumers and what types of issues that they potentially had with the situation. I am going to kind of show you this background of business. We kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. Want to make sure you have that resource. So if you've downloaded the slides, you'll have that link to the background of business section. We've also got the identity theft unit on there as well, in case you've had a situation where, you've discovered somebody's opened up accounts in your name or, creating financial accounts and trying to make you responsible for them. You can file those reports with us by going to that link. But I want to click the background of business section here, and hopefully that will open up. So you'll be able to see that, and I'll show you a couple of different, but if we've got all those links, those are those ones that I just mentioned. It's also got the search complaints tool on that page as well. So those are great places to start if you want to go through and see if another state agency oversees that specific industry. If you want to look at licensing involving our agency, you can also click that button and it's going to give you those links with, you'll see some of these Excel sheets there that will kind of give you information on max interest rates for some of those types of businesses. You'll also be able to look at car dealer closing fees, but then you'll also be able to kind of look up information on different industries that our agency regulates. So you'll be able to kind of look up company names and see if there's somebody that we've licensed or not. And again, it's got that other state agencies page on there as well. So that's a great tool for folks to take advantage of. And I would encourage you to take a look at that resource if you're interested. As we kind of get wrapped up, I want to encourage you to take a look at some of our other resources that we have at SCDCA. Our Ditch the Pitch, of course, is our scam prevention guide, and that's one of our more popular publications that we give out to folks. We've also got information on credit reports. That's a great tool for folks to go through, kind of look over and learn how to look at your credit report, what to look for, and kind of those warning signs of identity theft that might be out there. But it's also going to have great information for you, especially about freezing your credit reports. That's a great tool that I encourage everybody to take a look at that and consider freezing your credit reports. If you haven't done so, that could help you prevent identity theft from happening. We've got a lot of other publications as well. We've got physical copies and digital versions. You can go to consumer.sc.gov to either download those, or you can also request publications. We'll ship those to you anywhere you are. Generally speaking, we'll even mail up to 50 to some of your groups. So if you have a church or a library, community group that would like some of the publications, we'll send those to you. And we do webinars every Wednesday. Generally, our webinars are at 10:30 on Wednesdays. We have others from time to time at other times and other days of the week. Some of our upcoming presentations next week, we're going to be talking about the tax-free weekend, some of the shopping tips involving that. And that's that first weekend of August is when you don't have to pay sales tax for certain items in the state. And that's something that happens every year, but we'll be talking about some shopping tips to go along with that. Wednesday, August 6th, we'll be talking about child identity theft, just some things to keep in mind, some ways to go through your child's credit history. Unfortunately, children shouldn't have credit history, but identity thieves will kind of take advantage of that and then open up accounts and try to put, children responsible for purchases and things that they're doing with that information. So we'll kind of walk you through that and give you some tips, things to look out for and things you can do to protect your children. Then on August 13th, we'll kind of go over our Ditch the Pitch and our scam prevention guide and some of the information in that and give you some resources to help you protect yourself from identity theft and scams. And as always, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram, and really like for you to go through our YouTube page if you're interested in our webinars. We have a lot of our different information in there. I showed you the HOA playlist a little bit earlier, but we typically will put all of our webinars on YouTube either later that day or the next day, but you can go through there. We have a long list of topics, so everything that you can think of consumer related, we probably got a topic on there on our YouTube page. You can kind of go through those and see additional information for any of those presentations you maybe missed. And I'm going to take a look, see if there was anything that's popped in on our question tab. And it looks like we had one question, but we've already gotten that. So I appreciate that for our folks here who helped us get that. I am going to go ahead as we kind of get wrapping up. I'm going to show you my email and my phone number. So if you have any questions that might come up through the process, you can give me a call. But if it's kind of directly related to the complaints, I would encourage you to call that 800 number, 800-922-1594. And our consumer services division, our folks with that, can generally help you with that, especially our people who answer our main phone line. They have a lot of information and directly involved in some of those complaint processes and know a great deal of information that can help you get that kind of rolling, but we're happy to help any way you can. But if you have any questions that might come up, feel free to shoot them over to me. If you get our email notices about our webinars, feel free to even reply to that. That information will go to me too as well if you're replying to that public information email address, but that is my direct email right there on the screen. You're happy to call that number too as well if you have anything that's come up. But if I don't see any other questions coming in, we'll get wrapping up, and we appreciate you guys for joining us today. We hope you'll join us for another one of our Wednesday webinars. And I hope you'll go to consumer.sc.gov and take advantage of some of the resources that we have on there. I know a lot of the questions you may have about the complaint process, or especially HOA complaints. Again, all that information is going to be on there, all our forums, consumer.sc.gov. We thank you for being with us, and we hope we'll see you again soon.